Welcome back to Bloodborne. Last time we began our journey into Central Yarnum, and today we're going to finish it. In a way, I guess. We're headed to the bridge, and we're going to find our way to Cathedral Ward. But first, let's fight a big guy. These chufty gentlemen are relatively easy to fight. That's their most dangerous attack. The multiple brick-to-face combo. Particularly dangerous. And we're about to pick up our first alternate weapon. The torch. The torch goes in the gun slot, or one of the gun slots, and it is wielded in the left hand, primarily to light up dark rooms and other stuff, but it can also be used as a weapon. You can swing with it with the L2 button, and it'll do fire damage to anything it connects with. Interestingly enough, the torch is relatively unique in that it can actually be used as a pretty effective weapon, mostly in the earlier parts of the game, but still, the torch scales with arcane, and I think it can be upgraded. I'm relatively certain it can be, just like a normal weapon. So, you can make the torch do more damage if you upgrade your arcane and you really feel like it. It's not especially worth it, but it is a pretty interesting way to supplement your arsenal, I suppose. Now, in the last episode we picked up some Molotov cocktails, and we have just picked up some oil urns to go alongside them. In Bloodborne, fire is very important, which you might have noticed already from the way we've been picking up torches, explosives, and there's giant bonfires everywhere. Oil urns coat the enemy in oil, so that the next fire-based attack, be it from a Molotov, which it usually is, or a fire weapon maybe, or the torch, will do double damage of whatever it usually does. So it's pretty important to carry around some oil urns if you're going to be chucking Molotovs at things. Coming up here, we have a pretty tough early fight, actually. If you don't quite know how the game's aggro range and enemy leashing works yet, this little set piece here can actually be a pretty hard challenge. This is our first introduction, really, to dogs in the middle of fights. Because, see, dogs are the worst enemy in Souls games. Always, no matter what. I hate them. They suck. And they're especially bad in Bloodborne, because you have no way to block them. But you can shut them down temporarily by just shooting them. Then they fly backwards, and then you can do your thing. But yeah, the combination of dogs and I think the shooting guy definitely makes this fight quite a bit tougher, because the dogs will stun you long enough for the shooting guy to pull off a shot on you, and then you're dead. Meanwhile, the other citizens just kind of hang around doing their thing. I also attuned the pebbles to my hotbar because I don't really use them very much. I find that bullets aren't so rare that you can't just like shoot the enemy when you want to aggro them. But sometimes shooting at an enemy will attract multiple enemies, and I'm not sure why. It might be either because they can hear you, or they also get hit by the splash radius, of the gunshot. One of those two. I'm really not sure. So there are some werewolves over there. Like, honest to goodness werewolves. And I'm not too keen on messing with those guys right now because, well, I'm pretty poorly equipped for it. I could use the Molotovs, but I'm saving them. And my advice, I suppose, in this situation would usually be to just kind of go over to the left over there and avoid the werewolves for now, because there's stuff over there to pick up. Part of Bloodborne is bravery. And if you're not brave, then, well, what do you have? You got nothing. These werewolves are much tougher than the one we fought in the clinic. They are the first, what I would say, genuinely difficult enemy to fight. And I kind of made a chump out of this one, because I parried him both times. But their parry window is very, very small. And so it's easy to kind of get screwed up by him. That, I don't know how I parried that. That was pure luck, basically. The werewolves are a good introduction to how aggressive you really have to be in this game. Because, I mean, you saw there that it got stunned with every hit I did, even if it was just long enough for me to do another hit. So if you just keep attacking, eventually you will do enough damage to kill it, or run out of stamina and have to back off. But either way, every attack stuns the enemy, so it's worth it to be aggressive instead of defensive because you can pull off more hits at a time. So here's something I like about the level design. This ledge up here gives you a really good view of the area we were just in. You know, I looked down there a minute ago, and that little courtyard was full of that was like 15 enemies almost. And I think this little vantage point is it's a good little lookout spot for the player to stop for a second and be like, oh man, I chewed up all those guys like they were my lunch. I ate their breakfast, and other such phrases. Well, there's a plank stuck inside my body. That's fine. Thanks, Dark Souls physics. It's a good way to remind the player of what they have done to get there, even though it was only a couple of minutes ago. I just think it's a nice little vantage point like that. And down here, we're about to meet one of the more dangerous enemies in this area. As if the werewolves weren't bad enough. Because see, the werewolves were pretty bad, but it's pretty easy to circle around them, because all of their attacks carry them forward. These guys are trouble. So these guys are basically the second phase of beasthood. They are men that are halfway between man and werewolf. They're teen wolves. Or between wolves, I suppose, as it were. And the weapons they're carrying will, at worst, kill you outright. But they will, at best, stumble you enough that they can get another hit in on you before you can dodge. So it's very important to not get hit by them. Especially this guy with the spear. He does a lot of damage. Thankfully, they're pretty easy to parry, which is how I usually deal with them. But they have a bit too much health to finish off that way right now. So, you know, I gotta use at least a little bit of caution. But I actually think that is a pretty interesting introduction to them. They present you with a scenario where if you try to run away, you'll just end up running into more of them. So they give you ample room to dodge backwards instead, to allow you to check out their range before you go in and fight them. Because like I said, you can run past them, but it'll aggro the rest of them, and they have a very, very long aggro range, so then you'll end up with a bunch of them on your tail, which is not fun. This guy is interesting. This guy is usually facing the player's direction from around that corner, but that time he just wasn't. So, okay. Cool. And our reward for braving these tough enemies is clothing, the cornerstone of any Souls game. Clothing is very important in Bloodborne. Not because of the stats or anything, but because it looks cool. Something I really appreciate about Bloodborne, that the Dark Souls games for some reason have avoided doing for years, is it gives you the armor that's on the cover at the beginning of the game. Unlike Dark Souls 2, where you couldn't get the armor on the cover until the end of the game. Although actually this isn't the armor on the cover that we're wearing right now. The chest piece is different. but we'll get the right chest piece in due time. The Hunter's Garb is good for all-around defense. It's pretty much, I mean, you can beat the whole game wearing this outfit without specializing in any kind of defense. So armor works a bit differently in this game than it does in the other Souls games, in that you can't upgrade your armor. So all armor has a set defense. Basically it means that every set of armor is good in a different situation. So, for example, the Hunter's set, which we're wearing now, is just the general all-around set, and there are a couple more that are like that, but there are others that specialize in certain types of defense, like fire resistance, for example, that we'll get pretty soon, or electric resistance, and so on and so on. There's also another different armor-based mechanic, in that you take extra damage for each piece of armor you aren't wearing. So for example, if I took off the hat that I'm wearing right now, I would take, I think it's 5% more damage from all sources? I really don't remember. But either way, that was their way of tuning it so that armor is still mostly cosmetic, but it has a noticeable effect without the stats being ballooned. And oh boy, here comes our first taste of this game's weirdness. So the Madman's Knowledge is the first example of how there might be something deeper under the surface of Bloodborne that we are a little bit unaware of right now. Let me read to you the description so that you'll know what I mean by that. A madman's knowledge is the skull of a madman touched by the wisdom of the Great Ones, used to gain insight. Making contact with eldritch wisdom is a blessing, for even if it drives one mad, it allows one to serve a grander purpose, for posterity.
Wretched outsider, trying to fool me to open this door. Heavens, the depths of depravity.
I suggest you click on this annotation here, because it goes a little bit in depth on Bloodborne's story, and what Central Yharnam is all about. For each area in the game, I will be doing a little aside on the area's general design, and basically its significance to the story. When that eventually becomes apparent in the game, I'm not going to spoil anything for you. But for now, we have a friend to talk to.
Who are you? I don't know your voice, but I know that smell. Are you a hunter? Maybe it's through look for my mum. Daddy never came back from the hunt, and she went to find him. But now she's gone too. I'm all alone and scared.
Bummer. Yeah, sure, I'll help.
Really? Oh, thank you. My mum wears a red jeweled brooch. It's so big and beautiful. You won't miss it. Oh, I mustn't forget. If you find my mum, give her this music box. It plays one of Daddy's favourite songs. And when Daddy forgets us, we play it for him so he remembers. Mum's so silly running off without it.
I'll keep that in mind. I suppose we'll be on the lookout for someone seeking a music box. So here's another element of Bloodborne's design that I really like. Loopbacks. We have now unlocked a pretty significant shortcut. We can now go past the young girl's house to get down to the sewers much, much faster than going through this pretty tough encounter, going up to the bridge where the werewolves are, dropping down and fighting the other guys. Now we can just go that way. It's not extremely useful to me, because I'm actually not going to be coming back through that area in the same order. But it looks like I'm not going to have to, Because, hey, look. It's the bridge. And the entrance to Cathedral Ward. Oh, hello. What a jerk. But oh hey, that jerk has helped us. He has shown us the way to a slightly hidden path. It's a little bit hidden. You could probably walk right by that if that guy wasn't there. So you can see that the torch is pretty useful. It covers quite a large area. It definitely helps. It also gives areas a nice red, pretty glow, which I guess is a tertiary effect, more than anything. Dark areas certainly are eerie, though. Especially in games like this, where there's stuff waiting to jump out at you around every corner. I wonder how many people got fooled by that. Thought that guy was a friend or something. It's gotta be a non-zero number. Interesting. It seems that the Great Bridge is blocked during hunts, possibly to keep beasts out, or to keep the residents of Cathedral Ward safe. Now that doesn't bode well for our journey to get across the bridge, but it said something about old Yarnum, and I guess old implies it was a long time ago. So maybe that's not the case for this hunt. Maybe that refers to one of the previous ones. I guess there's only one way to find out. So we got one more loop back coming up here that I think is one of the most brilliant in the whole game. Because we've gone through the whole area now. We have seen everything there is to see in Central Yarnum. Pretty much. There's one more path we need to go down. But not quite yet. And the reason I like this loop back so much is because Central Yarnum only has the one lamp, which I think is really cool. They did so much with such little space as this. Central Yarnum is very cramped. The streets are very tight, and there are very few big open courtyards like the one with the burning werewolf. And so it's interesting that they were able to cram so many shortcuts into such a tight enclosed space, instead of just like blocking them off and making you go all the way around. I see this old man has come to feed the birds. Why don't we just take care of that right now? Believe it or not, crows are actually pretty dangerous. Not on their own. On their own, they're pretty easy. But when they are grouped together with other types of enemies, they become a little bit more than just a nuisance, because every hit you take from a crow will stun lock you enough that you can't roll away until just before the next hit hits you. So if they start mixing in other enemy types with the crows, they become a bit of a problem. So here we are. We've reached our destination. Now let's head across to Cathedral Ward and see what's up. Oh no, a boss popped out. So this is the Cleric Beast, the first boss of Bloodborne. This guy, oh boy. He throws players for a loop. He's very aggressive, very strong, knocks you over real easy, and he's really creepy to look at. He does a lot of damage, believe me. He can kill me in, maybe 2 good hits, even with the clothes I'm wearing. Coincidentally, that's why I went to go and pick up the clothes first, is just in case I got hit here. Because again, this fight is very tough starting off. Especially when you're like me and you haven't even leveled up yet. And see, the reason that loop back to the lantern is actually there is to give you an easy access point in case you die to Cleric Beast. You can just go right back. So what I've done there is, certain bosses in Bloodborne are relatively unique, in that they can be stunned, like normal enemies can, and then you can go in for a riposte, just like you can with other enemies that you can parry. To parry Cleric Beast, you just shoot him in the head, but for other bosses it's not so simple. Making good use of these Molotovs, but my arcane is pretty low, so they don't do very much damage. Which is actually fine. I didn't want to beat this guy too quickly, because an important part of bosses in Bloodborne is showing off their moves, because they have a lot of pretty cool ways to kick your ass. But I'm out of Molotovs anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Well, we did it. I'm very proud of us. So let's go across the damn bridge, now that that guy's not in the way anymore. That horrible, horrible monster. We'll talk about the lore behind the Cleric Beast a little bit later. For now, let's just get to safety, shall we? Well, shit. The gate is closed. Bummer. I'll see you next time, when we find an alternate way to Cathedral Ward. A way that's not blocked by a Cleric Beast. Hey there. This is the first major bonus feature of the Bloodborne Let's Play in which I'm going to go over the game's story. Before I actually get into it, I want to clarify something. I'm going to make sure to only tell you the facts. Concrete stuff that is either plainly spelled out in the game or at least easily inferred. If I'm speculating on something, I'll make sure to say so. Otherwise, you can take my word that everything you're going to learn from these bonus clips is solid, backed up information. So let's get started. Yharnam is a sprawling city nestled in a remote mountain region, settled atop a plateau and surrounded by a massive crescent-shaped lake. The city's main district, Central Yharnam, is where it all starts. The world of Bloodborne is vast and open, but every new visitor must begin in Yosefka's clinic. Or a clinic, at least, as Yharnam is the home of blood ministration. Blood is very important in Yharnam. The city thrives on it. People drink it like fine wine. Thanks to the miracle of blood healing, its people live well and healthy. Or so they think. In reality, Yharnam is a sick place. The rest of the world, what little we know of it, see Yharnam's inhabitants as freaks, weirdos, people with no moral boundaries. The city's imposing and draconian architecture towers above its citizens, instilling closed-mindedness and fear of the unknown. Yharnamites don't like outsiders, and why would they? To the outside world, Yharnamites are sick folk, condemned to their own asylum. Yharnam's general aesthetic is reminiscent of the style of Gothic Revival. Better known as Victorian Gothic these days, it is characterized by tall, towering, and real pointy buildings, massive collaborations of stone and latticework, arches and curved inside ceilings that make even the most normal home look like a work of decorative art. A lot of people connect the influences of the early game's visuals to Bram Stoker, particularly Dracula. Every house, every clock tower is reminiscent of the old Western world image of where a vampire would live. Chilling and, as I said, imposing, Yharnam is a fantastic place to begin our descent into Bloodborne, but only time will tell if it has properly prepared us for the journey to come.